Definitely when I was younger, childhood arguments had to be tempered. Living in Italy, always be aware of our outward personas, which I think is relevant to what I do today. In the field that I work in, I do have a soft spot and nostalgia for living in Italy. I'm deeply inspired by that experience. So I have a capacity to go into pretty dark places and wade in them. My heart can handle a lot of darkness, but that's not necessarily why I make art. I just get inspired by ideas. The world doesn't really make sense. The world is kind of insane and absurd. There's no boundaries to this idea of a good art joke. I want people to get it. I want people to feel what I'm sharing. So there's a baseline that is broad and universal. As an artist, I'm glad I didn't go to grad school, but I've never had a problem with being a student. Why do I want to know so many people? How can I have a general view of the world if I haven't even talked to anybody? I am a bubble and I'm trying to break it.
Welcome to Angel City Culture Quest, where art, social justice, and the environment meet in Los Angeles. I am your host, Melina Paris, and I welcome you to this episode. Hi, folks, and welcome to Angel City Culture Quest. Today, we're speaking with artist Javier Proenza from What's My Thesis podcast. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Javier, and then we're going to get started. The son of United Nations diplomats, artist Javier Proenza grew up in the global foreign service networks of Washington, D.C., San Jose, Costa Rica, and Rome, Italy. While Rome nurtured his interest in art, history, and global politics, his high school and college years in Miami are when he reached his final form of Florida man. His conceptual art practice is centered on the universal absurdities of contemporary experience and is realized in various traditions, including painting, sculpture, video, and installation. In 2018, Javier gave up on grad school, designed a scam to have artists teach him for free, and pretended it was a podcast called What's My Thesis? Hi, Javier. How are you?
I'm good.
Today.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on. This is actually the first podcast outside of my podcast that I've ever done. So this is exciting for me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting for me too. You graciously suggested that we two art podcasters host one another on our respective shows to turn the tables, so to speak, and instead be interviewed. So I just want to thank you for your idea, and appropriately, your bio, a bit irreverent, provokes questions in me.
Okay. I'm happy.
In a good way.
No, for sure. I mean, hopefully it does something, right? Otherwise, why write it?
Exactly. That's the truth. So first, I'm curious, what was it like for you to grow up with UN diplomats as parents, and did their influence foster diplomatic and negotiation skills in you?
That's a good question. Definitely when I was younger, our social lives were related to our parents' professional lives. So there was a lot of concern, especially living in apartments in Italy. There's a smaller space. It's not like out here in LA, you have big yards. So childhood arguments had to be sort of tempered in a certain way. Not that they always were, obviously. I come from a family of four. But yeah, it was definitely an influence. I went to a British international school. My best friend when I was little was from Kenya. His dad was a pilot back when pilots did well for KLM. And yeah, I actually knew somebody from a matriarchal society. It's hard to feel bad for him, but it was a funny thing that he used to say. But yeah, so it was a very big international community. We would hang out a lot at my dad's functions and stuff. So we were always kind of taught to be aware a little bit of our outward personas, which I think is kind of relevant to what I do today, which is like constantly stress myself out about trying to be a public person in the field that I work in, because I'm also an artist.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how did you traverse being nurtured as a youth in art, history, and global politics in Rome to becoming your final form of Florida man in Miami? It sounds like it was a culture shock.
Oh, absolutely. I recently realized that I've been lying to people because I've been saying that I didn't live in the US until I was 12. But actually, I was born in Washington, D.C. So technically, I don't have memories of living in the US until I was 12, I guess is the proper way of saying that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was absolute culture shock. I remember it being culture shock living in Italy as well, right? Like I remember that we couldn't drink fresh milk because Chernobyl had happened. I think that that was globally, but those are the little
Yeah.
details that I remember. We had to drink Parmalat. All the stores, instead of being like department stores, everything was very specialized in Italy. It was kind of quaint in some ways. I remember when the first mall was built in Rome and it was crazy. But as an American person, I also remember having birthdays at McDonald's and there was like a Dairy Queen there. So I was inspired by the culture, but I wasn't really of it. I spoke Italian and a lot of my friends were Italian. But when I came to the US, I really realized how not Americanized I was. I had a British accent because I went to a British
Mm.
international school. And when I came back, everybody was like, you talk weird kind of stuff. So Miami's a very specific place to live. And it was in the 90s that I think I finally reached Florida man form, where there was, as the stereotype says, a lot of drug use in that time period. I'm sure there still is. I just am not tapped into it anymore.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I grew up very much in that realm. And as part of that, I ended up in strange, obscure places in Florida. There's a writer called Carl Hyacin. He writes mystery books, like murder books, but they're all set in Florida. And
Mm.
all the archetypes that he writes about are like Florida archetypes. So I really, really relate to that. It's just weird. Like people are actually crazy there. And it's the heat that does it to them. I think Florida is kind of a forgotten place that like the government really didn't have much use for it. And not to get too political, but I think that whatever is happening in the Caribbean, that you see a lot of diasporas from Cuba and from
Right.
Haiti. I think that, not to get conspiratorial, but it is convenient for an anti-communist community to take all of the people that were harmed by communism and bring them to a place in the US. And now there's a stereotypical voting bloc. And I think that they're kind of doing that a little bit with Venezuela as well. Now there's an influx of Venezuelans and Argentinians less so, but like we have been sanctioning Venezuela to instigate that
Yeah.
migration from people that really just don't want to struggle. And then you end up with a voter base in a state that is actually surprisingly liberal in terms of cultural issues. I always say that Miami is
Hmm.
one of the gayest places I've ever been because a lot of people think that because it's right wing, it's very prejudicial in that context. I don't know how they feel about trans issues. I haven't lived there in a long time, but my perception growing up is that being gay was part of the landscape,
It was
you know?
normal. Yeah.
I think that the benefit is these voting blocks. I think they also do that with Haitians, where like Haiti has a lot of iridium, which is very hard to find. A meteor crash there, like before people probably,
Hmm.
and it has very specific materials that are not as heat conducing, but are metals. So it's one of the reasons that the Dominican Republic doesn't really get messed with the same as Haiti.
The whole extraction and what we
Yeah,
gain.
extraction
Yeah.
economy. And I think that that's one of the things of being Florida man. Florida man includes Cubans. I love LA and it's great here, but the way that Americans perceive Latinos here versus the way that Americans, because that's how Cubans refer to like white people, they call them Americanos,
Hmm.
right? Americans would never deign to talk to a Cuban that way. It just wouldn't register because of the fact that they run the entire city. There was a white flight and Miami for like at least my entire lifetime, as most of the politicians are Cuban. It's an interesting dynamic because I've been here for like however long. And then I went back and I felt good being Latino again instead of being kind of
Oh.
like not second class, but there is a hierarchy and there's like an
Hmm.
influx of people from all over the world here, whereas like Miami is ours to Latinos, I mean, specifically. So it's interesting. It's an interesting dynamic to go back there. So I think that that includes Florida man. Like Florida man probably has an accent, like a white Florida man probably has an accent that sounds like he speaks Spanish, even though he doesn't speak Spanish, because that's the Miami accent.
Oh,
So
wow.
South Florida man is Latino influence without even, you hear it all the time. It's great. I love that. That's one of the things that I hated it when I lived there. And I understand the problems I had with Miami. It's like a small town. There's not that much to do compared to like Los Angeles or even New York
In
or
Miami,
even
really?
Rome
I,
or Florence. I
that's
mean, it's changing, but ultimately it's just hanging out. But yeah, I do have a soft spot and nostalgia for that part just as much as I do for living in Italy.
oh, wow. That's interesting to hear about. And that bit about the difference between Dominican Republic and Haiti and the reasons why. I was not aware of that. So that's interesting to hear about.
To us, it's local politics.
Yeah.
It's interesting stuff. So I'm always listening out for that.
So, can you please describe a recent conceptual artwork that you've created and how does it manifest what you call universal absurdities of contemporary experience?
So I have grown up with a considerable amount of stress from mental illness. I have an obsessive compulsive disorder. So I have a capacity to go into like pretty dark places and wade in them. Now that I'm medicated, my heart can handle a lot of darkness. But that's not necessarily why I make art. I think more in my podcast that shows up. Whereas the universal absurdity is kind of maybe more of a Dadaist sense. There's the German Dada, which is a little bit more dour and more serious because they're actually tied to Germany during a horrible period. But before that, it was more about absurdity. In general, Dadaism is more about kind of the world doesn't really make sense. The world is kind of insane and absurd. And that's where the absurdism comes from in that sense. That's my understanding. I'm sure there's a lot more explanation to that. But within how I've absorbed Dadaism, that's how I feel about it. I don't champion them, but I talk about the importance of the futurists who were actually fascists just before the Dadaists came out. And they were doing avant-garde stuff, which is interesting to me because we think of avant-garde being sort of like a left-leaning thing, right? And I think ultimately we can get into like how the CIA collected Jackson Pollock and made avant-gardism sort of an American brand. But I really find interesting, Marinetti never really made any artwork. He wrote a bunch of manifestos about performances and stuff like that and conceptual ideas, which is really interesting from a conceptual art point. He had a manifesto of futurist cooking about how to do this futurist cuisine where they would bring in smells and then use fans to clear the smells out. And it's all very, very high-minded conceptual work that's beautiful. So what I love about that is that I can still relate to some of those concepts with people that I disagree with politically entirely. They're very much right-wing authoritarians. And so it's interesting to me that there is that general sense of there's no boundaries to sort of this idea of like enjoying a good art joke kind of thing, right? Because I feel like a lot of that lies in that. So to answer your question about what's the most recent conceptual piece that I've made, I'm still working on it, but I'm making right now a series of slow motion videos of traffic. Not when it's like high traffic, not like rush hour, but around 3 p.m. And you sort of see these little pods. It causes anxiety, but it's also kind of soothing. So it's traffic that's flowing a little bit, but you see one car brake a little bit and how all the other pods react. So I like those relational things, and I want people to be able to get it. I want people to be able to sort of feel what I'm sharing. It's like a bummer. No one likes traffic. It's an awful thing. It's ruining the planet in some concepts, in some people's worldview, in other people's not. But even the people that don't believe that the traffic is harming the planet are still going to relate to how much it sucks. So there's a baseline there that is broad and universal. So that's the universality. We all are frustrated with how ridiculous everything is. Back in 2012, I did a self-portrait with a receipt printer that printed out all of my purchases of the year. So right now, I feel like the conceptual side of the work was so deliberate that I could explain pieces to people without them having to actually see them, which was frustrating to me because it felt like a gimmick. So now I'm doing stuff that's a little bit more actually tied into one of the futurists' work. I grew up in the parts of Rome that were outside of the main gates of Rome, a part called Eur. I'm very passionate about Italian history, especially the city-states and all that. But Mussolini at one point drained all these marshlands and made a new area. There's part of it that's very Art Deco, the 20s. But then after that, all these suburbs that are not what you would think of American suburbs, there's buildings. So like apartment buildings, apartment complexes with a grassy area next to it. And then we had huge fields in the background. So I grew up in a part of Italy that was sort of built maybe after fascism, but was still very much inspired by, I believe, Antonio Santalia. So it's very sci-fi. I grew up fantasizing of living in a sci-fi world. These buildings are amazing. It wasn't like projects like how there are in Paris. We were in a good area. I'm sure there are projects like those where a lot of the Muslim community lives outside the greater Paris area, documented in that movie La Haine, which is from the 90s. It's called Hate. So don't picture that if you if you're picturing it. Picture just
No.
something that was idyllic and fun. And we had ruins in our backyard. They were just random unknown ruins. So part of me jokes internally that my life will never be as good as it was back then because I didn't have to worry about nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just got to play back before everybody was freaked out about horrible things. I remember one time my mom told me, like, don't get in a fridge because you won't be able to open it from the inside. And like parents are probably worried about much scarier things. Kids are probably not going to come across a fridge like that because they're not outdoors, like just randomly playing. I tell my mom that there are parts of where we live that she'll never know about that I discovered. These open fields. There was a castle in the background that was used for filming. It had a moat. We tried to go to it one time. We got to the moat. We couldn't get across it. They call it the Eternal City because there's all these layers of history on top of each other. You can go to underground Rome and underneath buildings, you'll see like what the original foundations of what was there was.
That's fascinating.
I just get inspired by ideas and I love stuff like that. So basically what I was saying is that right now I'm painting these paintings that are deeply inspired by that experience, but I'm painting basically abstractions and I'm not really a painter. So to give an idea of my practice, I work on whatever I feel is appropriate for what I'm trying to do. So like I was saying, I'm more looking for something a little bit more intuitive and less I can tell you exactly what it is, but it's a basic pattern that repeats itself, but I can modulate it and make it look different. And it plays on your perception, makes you think that you're looking at a perspective drawing, but then you see the perspective doesn't make sense because it's not actual 1 point perspective. I would say it's like a repeating little box pattern that looks like buildings, but it also looks like an artifact, like a sculptural element. So I put them right in the middle of the page. At first, it would frustrate me that I was drawing them like that. And then I just leaned into it and I was like, no, I'm doing this because it's an artifact. It's a thing in open space, but it also looks very flat. So it's an interplay on objectness and stuff like that. It's more conceptual work about painting, I guess, to some degree. But that is what I like about conceptual art and why I work in the ways that I work. I like to understand the materials and try to use its voice to play conceptually like that. A great example of somebody that's an inspiration for this kind of stuff is Frank Stella, who recently passed away. Sort of flat stuff, but it's not quite flat. Graphically, it's different, but it's that same like play of the materials. I'm just basically copying him. I realized. No, I'm kidding. It doesn't look anything like it, but it still works. It still sits in the same tradition of painting, where the objectness of the painting is relevant to the objectness of the subject matter.
I see. And I think I saw them when I visited you. I think they were laying.
Am I describing them well or am I being too grandiose?
I think so. I do. I think so. Thank
you. Thank you.
If you're just tuning in, today we're speaking with Javier Proenza of What's My Thesis. Thank you for listening. Hi folks, this is your host, Melina Paris. Angel City Culture Quest is growing. We're barely into our 3rd year now, and there's so much more quest-worthy inspiration to bring you. Art, books, film, coverage of local events, and more. We've gotten a new QR code, so you can capture episodes on the go, because I know you're busy. We've been creating artistic flyers unique to each episode, and new Angel City Culture Quest stickers. And there's more to come. As you know, there are costs to keep this podcast going. So, if you're able, join me in this quest with your support. Think of it as a cultural tip jar to share any amount that you're comfortable with. Even a few dollars a month will contribute to my ability to continue bringing you the great work of these artists, activists, and others, and the cultural content that you want to hear about. I would be honored to have your support. To donate, please go to my Patreon link at patreon.com/Angel City Culture Quest. There you can also see all of our past episodes. Thank you. And real quick, You've got guitars behind you. How long have you been playing?
On and off since I was like 8 years old, I think. I think there's
Oh.
video of me doing a recital, and I remember messing up, but there were so many of us you couldn't tell.
Have you taken it further, or is it
I
just,
just like playing. I love guitars. If I could, I would collect cars, but I do play and I have a crazy pedal collection, but I don't gig. It's more of
Mhm.
like a private thing for me. I know that every time I record, I mess up. Doing it in front of an audience sounds super stressful. So I'm a bedroom guitarist.
As
I
long
just
as you
love guitar.
enjoy? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's times when I go through bouts of making music, but then I would be a podcaster, a musician, and an artist. And there's just, I'm 44 years old. There's just like
Only so much time.
only so much time. Maybe I'll come up with an art piece related to guitars and then I can delve into it. And also, I was working at a guitar store, so I got a lot of stuff
Oh,
on discount. And I was like, I'm never going to buy this otherwise. But if I could just crank this stuff up, and play it super loud in this apartment, it would be such a treat.
what kind
Go
of
ahead.
music do you like?
When I was in college, I was very much into electronic music. Miami really shaped my music taste because it's a peninsula, but it's also an island. Musicians don't want to do an 8 hour drive to go down there. So they'll usually come to like Orlando, if you're lucky, West Palm Beach. So it's its own little incubator of music. There was a party venue called Pop Life. And I think that that really encapsulates what I think Miami living was like at the time. It's very like pop music, but it's not mainstream pop. It's like electro pop and stuff like that. So I got into that. I was really into drum and bass. I was a raver. Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins was one of my favorite guitarists early on.
Mm.
1994, when Siamese Dream came out, I was like blown away by it. I still love the way that those guitars sound. I like a lot of stuff. I had a hip hop period. I just got back into it because of Kendrick Lamar and Drake.
Yeah, yeah,
That
there's a
beat,
whole thing going on
like,
there.
man, you didn't realize how much the Tupac Biggie was carrying back then. But I don't know, would that music be as popular if it wasn't for that? I don't mean to diminish Biggie and Pac, but I definitely am okay diminishing Puffy at this point.
Yeah, your taste is very well rounded. That's cool.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a lot in there.
Yeah.
So finally, how does your podcast, What's My Thesis, edify you and the artist in you?
Oh my goodness. This is such a great question. You kind of gave me goosebumps because I literally had a recent experience. Basically, I have recently started to realize that people listen to it, first of all, and take it seriously, which is an adjustment. It's still a very small show. So if you guys want to come and listen and like and subscribe, please do. But the whole thing, like I said in the intro, I basically didn't want to go to grad school because I didn't really want to teach. But I've never had a problem with being a student. So I did miss out on that sense. At this point, like I've been doing it for 6 years on and off. There was COVID, and I took a couple breaks
Mm.
during that period to reassess and sort of retool what I wanted to do after like figuring out that everything had changed. But yeah, honestly, the whole concept has always been to have people come and teach me something. And today, as we're recording this, just dropped was Matt Stromberg's episode, who writes for Hyperallergic, which is like a big get for me. And I've had a bunch of people, John Plipchuk, I've had Elmer Guevara, people whose careers are doing very well. And as I'm doing that more and more, I just get to ask them about how the business works. I
Mm.
had Tita Whitney Leck, who's from around your part of town. I think she went to Cal State Long Beach. I don't know where she's at now, but she basically just, what is it like to have the success that you're having? How did you do it? And it's really instructive. It demystifies the stuff. And then recently I interviewed somebody and they were having stress about, well, before I get to that one, I took my friend to the show at Jeffrey Deitch, which is, I forget what it's called, but it's the one with Rafa Esparza and all those people. And I was there with my friend who was visiting from out of town, and I had some pretty good insights on the show just because I know artists that are in that sphere, artists that are having a dialogue specifically about the show. And I wouldn't know that if I hadn't done the show. I think that as an artist, it makes me realize that I can basically have, you saw my pieces. Matt Stromberg was looking at my pieces. He seemed to be into them. And now I feel like if I get to a point where I feel I have enough work that I really want to do a studio visit with him
And show,
somewhere
yeah.
down the line, I don't think that it would be awkward for me to invite him. Whereas if I just hit him up out of nowhere, I was like, hey, I'm a stranger, want to do a studio visit. So I think that that visibility is helpful. And then the other thing that I was saying was that I recently had an artist that had been added to a list of artists on a website of a gallery. They had a show and then they put them discreetly on the website. And I'm not going to say who it is, but I was able to help them with that because another episode that's coming out soon is I talked to an art advisor who basically explained how the whole business side of it works. Because without her, billionaires don't or millionaires don't have access to these galleries because these galleries don't want just like random people mailing them. You get an art advisor and then they have access to the spaces and then they broker the deal, which is such a nuanced thing that I had no concept of. And then I started asking her questions about like what artists should look out for. And based on that conversation, I was able to give this person whose career is actually at a more advanced place because she has the problems that I was helping her with. I was actually able to give her advice because I talked to somebody else. So now I'm starting to realize that this is making me a resource and I can be helpful to people that are my friends and peers, even though I have no experience in the art world at
That's
those
what it's about.
stakes.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. And I think that that speaks to how opaque all of this is. One of the things that Saskia Bailey, the art advisor, said to me, and I've known her since before the pandemic, probably like since 2018. So like I've known her for 6 years. She just built this career and now she's brokering deals with people. But what she said was that it's a business partnership. And a lot of times artists will be in a situation where they're represented and then they have grievances. But she said they don't have grounds because they didn't negotiate this at the beginning. So basically, what I told my friend, the artist that was on the show, who I'm friendly with, I have to be careful with how I word these things now. But what I was able to tell her was that, look, you are at the moment where you need to negotiate with them. And then I talked to my friend and I was like, hey, this happened. And my friend Saskia was like, who I'm talking about, was saying like, oh yeah, it's amazing how often galleries do this. So galleries are incentivized to not have any contracts with you and sort of sneak you under the radar like that. This is a unique thing. This happens all the time. So what I realized is like, this is the time for her to negotiate with them and tell them what she wants because they're obviously interested in her. So sit down, have the discussion of what are your expectations. And then so knowing that, I'm like, well, why can't I do it? It doesn't seem so hard all of a sudden. So as an artist, I'm glad I didn't go to grad school. Short answer. And that's not for everyone. This is not a fun thing to do on a regular basis. You have to really, really enjoy it.
It's work. I know, but I enjoy it too. So
yeah.
But that's great. I love it because it just came right back around to my first question, your negotiation and diplomatic skills.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, it's something that I do think about. Why am I doing this? Why do I want to know so many people? Because a lot of people don't want people to want things from them. And that's a perfectly valid thing. So like, what is it about me? And it is that I'm getting a whole lot out of it. All the nonsense that goes on, all the egos, all the things that happen, all the stress that comes, because I do it weekly and putting out an episode weekly and all of that and deciding what order to put things in and, oh, it's doing well is also stressful, you know?
Yeah. And there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do.
Yeah. So ultimately, I love it. I like people. There's an intimacy that I get from interviewing people in this context that I will never get anywhere else. Having headphones on and just whispering to each other from across the room. It's like that game you used to play. If you ever went to a science museum where there's one dish on one side and then another dish on the other side, and then you can like talk into this little hole and you can whisper to each other. That's what podcasting is, except you're like facing each other and you're talking about very intimate stuff. Like people get tripped out. And sometimes people freak out just because of the intimacy. And that's where the anxiety comes. And if you have empathy, you can get past that. You'll be like, okay, this person's really stressed out. It's not worth it to put out this episode.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. And I could see why you're being inspired by all this and
100%,
the connections and being able to give back to your friends. That's a wonderful thing.
I'm less concerned about that part, but it seems to be also part of it.
Yeah. It goes
I'm
on.
me-centered. People, that's funny. People always come in. They're like, I was trying to figure out what my thesis was. And I was like, the show's called What's My Thesis?
Let's be
because
frank.
It really is. It really is about my ignorance and being taught. So what am I thinking? How can I have a general view of the world if I haven't even talked to anybody? I am a bubble and I'm trying to break it. I appreciate the time constraints, so I want to honor you. But I also don't want to give you like, sometimes people come on and they give you like a one-word answer and you're like, I worked really hard on that question.
I know. No, it's about communication though.
Yeah.
And I think that's key and sharing that information. And that's
Yeah.
important. I think it's great. So thank you and
Thank
carry
you so much.
on.
Thank you so much for having me. This is
Thank
great.
you, Javier. I appreciate your suggestion and I appreciate you coming on. Where can people find you?
Well, they can first of all listen to What's My Thesis on YouTube or wherever podcasts are available on audio
Mhm.
platforms. We have an Instagram. It is What Is My Thesis because my first one got canceled from
Oh,
Instagram. They never tell you why. And then we have Twitter as well. That is What's My Thesis as well. And I'm at Javier Proenza on Instagram. As you know, there's a lot of work in podcasting. I've caught up to a place where I can spend more time on my practice. So check that out. There's going to be a lot more at Javier, JAVIER PROENZA with an at in front of it. That's my Instagram. Thank you so much for the opportunity. As you know, our job is to sort of sit and listen. And as you can tell, I have a lot to say.
yeah. It's been really interesting though. So
Yeah, yeah. We are beyond friendly. We're friends now. So I declare it. Unless you
declared.
reject it. You're
No,
welcome
no,
to
no.
reject
Declared and
it.
accepted.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.